Our project is Itogene, and it's about AI applied to genetic diagnosis. So you'll hear much more about genetic diagnosis after with Emily's talk. So in the case of Itogene AI project, we are trying to assist with this specific task. And that is from a retinal scan, we are trying to identify the affected gene that is causing a person's inherited retinal condition, such as Stargardt. So this is to assist genetic diagnosis, and Emily will go into much more detail about this after my talk, so I'm not going to explain what a genetic diagnosis is. So the idea basically is we're giving Itogene a retinal scan as input, and we're expecting a label, which is a gene name as output. So here the gene name represents the affected gene causing the person's retinal condition. So why is this important? Well, it's important since a retinal scan is often the first exam that everyone will have. And so if we're able to assist with identifying inherited retinal conditions such as Stargardt from a retinal scan, we can potentially help people get the correct genetic diagnosis much earlier, and this can help them get the right help. So how are we doing this? Well, Itogene is a special kind of AI, which is used for image recognition. It's a special type of neural network known as a convolutional neural network. And it's been trained on thousands of retinal scans labeled with genes gathered over many, many years by clinicians as part of their clinical care. For example, clinicians such as Michelle Miguelis at Morpheus Eye Hospital. So thankfully, the training process, even though it took years to gather the data, the training process doesn't take years, thankfully, it only takes hours on a high-performance computer. And in the end, Itogene is trained so that it's able to identify an affected gene from a retinal scan. So what do the results look like? So currently, we're able to identify the correct gene in our top predictions 85% of the time. So this is already really helpful because given that there are a very large number of genes, over hundreds, that can cause inherited retinal conditions, there are still very few people who have the experience to interpret images, and as accurately as Itogene. So furthermore, if we ask Itogene to only consider a smaller number of possible genes, such as genes that look similar to Stargardt, for example, some of them you might have heard of, obviously ABCA4, you might have heard of PRPH2 and PROMON. These are the genes that can look on retinal scans quite similar to Stargardt, then we get an even higher accuracy from Itogene, over 90%. So where do we want to go next? So we're just over 1 year into our research, and our Itogene research is funded by the NIHR for another 2 years. More specifically, we're funded by an NIHR AI award. So our aim is to have Itogene sufficiently developed at the end of these 2 years so that it can be used in clinics to help doctors with genetic diagnosis. So we are currently refining Itogene and working closely with clinicians such as Michel and his team to improve the performance of Itogene so that the output of Itogene is more interpretable and behaves a bit less like a black box. So that, for example, it can highlight relevant parts of the scan that are used in identifying the gene. Furthermore, we're also planning on focusing our work on different types of conditions, and Stargardt being the most common inherited retinal condition we have at Morpheus. We are looking at doing some sub-analysis on this to distinguish different types of Stargardt from retinal scans. And we would very much value your contribution because we're running a patient advisory group as part of this. And Diana, who's in the audience here, and Bhavna are part of this group, so please get in touch with them or myself if you're interested in being part of our research or have any other questions. We also have a website, as you can see, www.itogene.com. If there's a form there, you can fill and just get in touch with us if you've got any questions about this project. So I realize my presentation was maybe a bit high level and short, but I thought I'd give more time to questions. So I'm very happy to answer any questions anyone has. I think there will be a panel discussion as well afterwards. Thank you very much.
Does anyone have any initial questions, Nicholas, whilst the next getting presentation for our next speaker? Any questions online? That's okay. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So one of the questions online is, what are some potential applications of machine stroke deep learning in the development of gene therapies for Stargardt disease, and how much How might these approaches improve the efficacy and safety of these treatments? Gosh.
Firstly, I apologize. I maybe spoke a bit fast. I think I had too much coffee. Okay, so my work is really focused on the diagnosis steps from imaging. I don't work on therapies. I think Michelle and other clinicians, perhaps in the audience, are much better placed to talk about this. I think where AI and image processing in general can help is in quantifying disease progression automatically from images, and looking at images in a much more comprehensive way that you could do by just looking at them like with your eye, basically quantifying progression of certain features, for example, in image lesions and so on. So that's where AI can help in monitoring, for example, the progress of a retinal scan of a patient's retina that is part of a trial. It then can also maybe be used, but this is something I don't know much about, but it's used, for example, for identifying potentially new proteins or treatments or whatever, new molecules that can be used to treat disease. Again, there's companies and researchers working on this. It's not really my area, but that's an application. So we use more for sort of discovery tasks using protein data or molecules and so on. So these are the applications I can think of right now when it comes to treatment. Does that answer the question?
I hope so.
Yeah, I hope so. Okay. Good. Any other questions?
We've got one more question, a couple of questions over there, and then we'll invite Emily up.
What about sort of screening? Do you envisage that this technology will then allow for mass screening of the population for retinal diseases? Because if it takes away the burden of the expertise on diagnosis, then presumably you could then potentially scan a lot more retinas a lot more quickly. With a follow-up question, do you think a phone camera will ever be able to take a retinal scan?
Sorry, let me get the microphone. Yes, is the answer. Okay. Yeah. So there's a lot of people working in this area for more common diseases like diabetic retinopathy, and especially in places, more remote places where a phone camera is sometimes the only sort of imaging technology that people have access to take images of the eye. So I should say, I mean, I didn't go into the sort of limitations of this work, but currently the data set that's being used to train the eye to gene is a hospital data set, which is very different from a data set that you would get at an optician. So one of the extensions to this work would be to gather data from opticians and so on in order to build such a screening AI system. But this system can be used in hospitals and clinics where this type of imaging is available, but probably wouldn't work very well with opticians if they don't have the right systems and so on. The other thing to consider is that if you screen the general population, a Stargardt, even though for inherited retinal conditions is a very common condition amongst them, it's a very rare condition overall in the population, like 1 in 3,000 or something. So you might get a very high, you'd have to tune your AI very carefully not to get like a really high rate of misdiagnosis of false positives. And also you don't want to miss anyone in the population. So again, false negatives would be something to consider, but I think the risk is you might be overdiagnosing, so you have to be very careful about that. But yeah, it's a really interesting area of research. It's a bit challenging because those data sets are difficult to get by, I think, at the moment for me at least. But yeah, I think we should, it's something to look into.
There's another question here just in front.
Hi. My question is this a homegrown in-house Moorfields initiative, or could you work with the big boys, Azure, AWS, that have this giant AI processing and automation capabilities to speed things up.
So it is, so yeah, to answer your first question, it is a homegrown funded, government-funded, NIHR-funded initiative. We work with, we use technologies from Azure, as you mentioned, and cloud-based providers and so on. But I think that the big problem is not so much the methods, but more the data and curating that data. So we're in a very lucky position at Malthus that we have that data, and it's been curated by experts over many, many years. And so having that data and being able to work with that data is really the key here. It's also important to link data across different parts of the world because it's such a rare condition overall. So that's an effort we are working on. So linking the data. But once I think we may obviously make use of all the technologies out there, but it's not necessarily also a problem that, for example, Google would be necessarily interested in working on. They are very picky about, I guess, what they choose to work on, right? So I mean, I would be obviously open to working with big tech companies at some point as well, potentially. But for now, it's very much homegrown. We've got another year and a half, 2 years roughly of funding, and so we're going to be looking at the next steps, and that could potentially be working with tech companies.
Great, thank you very much, Nicholas. And Nicholas will be around for a bit. So if there are any other questions, please feel free. I am delighted to invite our next speaker up, Emily Clark. Emily is an extraordinarily experienced genetic counsellor. She currently works for Gene People, where she runs their helpline. But Emily has worked extensively in genetic eye disease clinics as well. So she has a huge amount of experience in this area and has visual impairment herself. Thank you so much for joining us, Emily. And would you like the microphone?
Sorry,
No, don't worry. Take your time. Let's make sure we get it all set up correctly.
Thank you. Oh yeah, I'm there. Okay.
We've got a script.
Yes.
Umesh, are we set up?
The slides.
Total slide. Give it a second. Lovely. Ready? Wonderful. And Umesh will run the slides for you, Emily. Thank you very much.
Hello everyone. How are you all? You okay? Lovely to be here, and thank you, Babna, for inviting me today to speak to you all. So bear with me, because what I'm doing to present today is just reading my audio notes, and I've got an AirPod in. So if I'm pausing for a moment, I'm just listening and catching up with what it's telling me. So don't worry if you can't see the slides. I can't see them either. I will talk you through everything. So on the next slide, please. This is just an overview, just to say in the next 10 minutes what I'm going to cover, which is 3 topics. So they're listed on the slide. The first is what genetic counselling is. Secondly, some of the pros and cons to consider around genetic testing. And then thirdly, the main inheritance pattern of Stargardt's disease. So next slide is what is genetic counselling. So we know that genetic conditions and genetic tests impact on both the individual and their wider family. Therefore, they can raise some unique issues for people. And this whole picture is what we address in genetic counselling. So genetic counselling has been described as the process of helping people to understand and adapt to the medical, psychological and familial implications of genetic conditions. And we do have an image on this slide, which is showing people asking some questions such as, what will it mean for my wider family or when I have children, and naming some of the emotions that people can go through around that, such as guilt, uncertainty, grief and loss, as well as others. So on the next slide, who are genetic counsellors? So just to let you know that genetic counsellors are health professionals with graduate education in medical genetics and the psychosocial and ethical aspects of genetic conditions, as well as having specialised training in counselling and communication skills. So it's a small profession. There's only about 300 registered genetic counsellors practicing in the UK. And it's important to say, of course, that genetic counsellors, we're not doctors. We don't make diagnoses, that's not our role. And also, just to be clear, we're not therapeutic psychological counsellors. So we don't provide therapeutic counselling in that way. Next slide. So thinking about a typical genetic counselling appointment, now these do vary, but they're usually about 45 minutes long, and they will likely involve taking and interpreting a medical history and family history. And assessing the family history involves drawing out the family tree. That is often the starting point in a genetic clinic. And a family tree diagram or a pedigree is shown in the top right of the slide. And we will explore your understanding of the condition and its impact on you. We'll explain about genetics and inheritance and often use diagrams to do that. Explain what genetic testing involves, including what genetic testing can and cannot tell you, going through the different types of possible results that can come from genetic testing. Discuss what genetic test results may mean for you and for other members of your family. And when test results come back, a genetic counsellor will explain what they show to you. Next slide talks a bit more about how, as well as talking and explaining genetics, a genetic counsellor will also think about the psychosocial aspects. And we take a person-centred approach when we're doing this, so it's non-directive. We don't tell people what they should do, and non-judgmental. And we aim to promote your autonomy and support you in making decisions that are right for you. We might explore how you're coping with a new diagnosis, what the emotional impact has been, what are your concerns and worries now and for the future. What would a test mean for you personally? Is this the right time to have testing? What are the pros and cons for you to consider, and what support you have in place? We might signpost and refer on to further support where that's needed, and also explore family dynamics and communication about a genetic condition. So that's genetic counselling. And just to say that my role as a genetic counsellor is with the charity Gene People, and so I run our free genetic conditions helpline, which is available for anybody to contact for information and support. So now to move on to our second topic, the pros and cons of genetic testing. So this is the next slide. What are the pros and cons of genetic testing? So the decision whether or not to have a genetic test is your decision. And we want people to make a fully informed decision and give informed consent. So it's important to discuss genetic testing in advance with a doctor or with a genetic counsellor. Having an appointment to discuss genetic testing does not mean that you have to go ahead with actually having the test at that point in time. You can always come back. On the next slide, so thinking about some of the kind of pros or benefits that can come from genetic testing, and I know you'll have been hearing a lot about what genetic testing can and can't tell you in some of the earlier talks today, but just to say that, of course, a test result may be able to give you an understanding of the cause of the condition and an explanation for why this has happened. It might clarify the precise diagnosis, so you can know for certain what the condition is, so it may potentially confirm it is Stargardt. It could provide information about the chance, therefore, of younger children or future children being affected by the condition, as well as understanding the chance of other family members developing the condition or passing it on to their children. It can enable access to genetic testing for those other family members, and it can also enable informed family planning and reproductive choices if that's something you want to explore. And identifying the genetic cause, of course, can also help you to know what research and clinical trials are relevant to you. So that's some of the potential benefits that can come from having a genetic test. On the next slide, we've got some of the cons and sort of limitations, I guess, of genetic testing. So waiting for test results, having testing, getting those results can bring a range of emotions for people. So it's really common to feel guilt, anxiety, fear, isolation. These are all really common feelings that many of the patients genetic counsellors work with go through. At the present time, genetic confirmation of Stargardt disease does not alter the treatment or management of the condition, or provide early interventions as yet. For some people who are thought to have Stargardt disease, the genetic cause may not actually be found. So I think that's in about 10% of cases of people who have a clinical diagnosis of Stargardt disease may not, through genetic testing, get confirmation of that genetically. I was speaking just before to Franz, who was maybe putting it 90–95%, would get confirmation. Michelle, 80%. So there's a bit of variation in what the thoughts are around that. So a negative test result does not mean it's definitely not Stargardt. Even with the testing that we have available today and our current knowledge and understanding, we still cannot always identify the genetic alterations that are causing the condition. Another possibility from testing is that test result might be inconclusive. So this can be where there may be a genetic alteration in the Stargardt gene found, but we're not sure whether it's a harmless alteration or an alteration that could actually cause the condition. So these sorts of genetic alterations are called variants of uncertain significance. And with time, we hopefully will be able to say whether a particular variant causes the condition or not. But that's an ongoing process that we're learning all the time about the genetics of Stargardt. Even with a definite genetic test result confirming the condition, this does not mean that we can say how mildly or severely somebody is going to be affected by the condition. So we can't give accurate prognostic information as yet, although again, that's something which I think is coming further down the line. So that's a bit about genetic testing. So now to move on to a third and final topic on the next slide, which is how is Stargardt's disease inherited? So to help us with this, I'll just quickly go over a bit of basic genetics, and then you may all be really well knowledgeable about this, but just in case. So we all have about 20,000 genes, and our genes are individual instructions that are made of segments of DNA that tell our bodies how to grow and develop and how to keep working properly throughout our lives as well. And the majority of our genes, they come in pairs. So we've got 2 copies of almost every gene, and we inherit 1 copy in each pair from mum and the other from dad. And the main gene, as you know, that's associated with Stargardt is the ABCA4 gene. So we've all got 2 copies of that gene. And for someone to have Stargardt's disease that's associated with ABCA4, they will have a genetic alteration in both of their copies of that gene. So you might call that a mutation. Nowadays, we tend to call it a pathogenic variant. There are different terms used. In genetic counselling, we often use terms like genetic alteration. So someone with Stargardt has got no working copy of the ABCA4 gene. And on the slide, that is represented in the image that's on the left, the circle on the left-hand side. So in that circle, we've got 2 lines that represent the ABCA4 gene. Both have got a red blob on them to show that neither copy is working as it should. Then the circle in the middle of the slide shows 1 altered copy of the gene, the red blob, and 1 working copy of the gene, which is a line without any red blob on it. So that would be somebody who's a carrier of the condition. Carriers do not have the condition because their 1 working copy of the gene is sufficient to keep everything working and healthy. And people do not and cannot know that they're a carrier unless they've had specific testing for some reason. And I think it's worth saying that we are all carriers of about 5 or 6 recessive genetic conditions. So in the right-hand circle is showing 2 working copies of the ABCA4 gene. And for someone in that situation, of course, they don't have the condition, and they're also not a carrier of the condition either. So this mode of inheritance that I'm describing here is called recessive inheritance. So next slide. Just to explain recessive inheritance in context. So on this slide, I've shown the possibilities when both parents are carriers of Stargardt. So both parents have one altered copy of the gene and one working copy. And remember that we only pass on one copy of each of our genes to our children. And we cannot control which one that is. That's random each time we have a child. So each time a carrier couple has a child, there is a 1 in 4 or a 25% chance of a child inheriting Stargardt's disease. So this chance is the same for every child. It doesn't matter where they are in the birth order. It doesn't matter whether they're male or female. There's also a 2 in 4 or a 50% chance of a child being an unaffected carrier of Stargardt's, like their parents, and a 1 in 4 chance of them being an unaffected non-carrier of the condition. So this is where we get 1 in 4 from for the chance of a child being affected by Stargardt's when both parents are carriers. And if a couple have had a child with the condition, then we would expect they are both carriers, although we would ideally want to confirm that by doing genetic testing. So on the next slide, if we think about a situation when one partner in a couple has Stargardt's disease themselves. And I've shown this on this slide as mum being affected by the condition, but it would be the same if it were dad. So the parent with the condition, they've got 2 altered copies of the gene. The unaffected parent generally is unlikely to be a carrier of Stargardt's. And in that situation, each of this couple's children will be an unaffected carrier of the condition. Of course, there is a chance that an unrelated partner could by chance be a carrier of Stargardt's. And it's thought about 1 in 50 people in the general population are a carrier of Stargardt's. So given that carrier frequency, we would say that the chance of someone with Stargardt's who has children with an unrelated partner will have about a 1% or a 1 in 100 chance of having a child affected by the condition. So that's an estimate, and based on what we know about the condition at the moment and also what we see in families. So we don't tend to see people with ABCA4 related Stargardt's having children with the condition. So I'd be happy, of course, to discuss that further with anybody if they want to later on or in the break. And just to say that I have got some diagrams to, which are large print as well as tactile diagrams that I've got in the area outside, where we can talk that through if that's going to be easier. Or you can contact me at a later time as well, that's fine. So that's the 3 topics I was going to cover for you, but I do just have one more slide very quickly. So this is my final slide. So as I just wanted to make sure that you know that you can ask your ophthalmologist or your GP or your child's paediatrician to refer you to your local NHS genetic clinic for genetic testing and counselling that is available for you. There are also some specialist genetic eye services, as you'll know, such as Moorfields, and details of those can be found on the Gene Vision website, and the link is on the slide. And it's important, I think, for you all to know that there is help and support through both the NHS and the voluntary sector with a genetic eye condition. My contact email at Gene People is on the slide as well, so you're welcome to get in touch with me. Thank you all for listening. I hope it's been useful, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Emily. Very good. Do we have any questions in the room for Emily at this moment? We have something online though, Brea?
We do. There's a range of questions which may have been asked late, which are better directed to medics. But the one question that you may be able to answer is, somebody is saying, do you know how long it should take to get the results of the genetic test? Because they've been waiting for over a year.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. And yeah, it's difficult to put an exact time frame on it. I wouldn't have expected it to be quite a year, 6 months, 9 months, but I think there are quite a lot of delays in the NHS at the moment with genetic testing, unfortunately. So what it would be definitely worth doing, I think, would be following up with whoever it was who offered the test and just see if they can give a better estimate of when results might be back, because that does sound like a long time to me.
Thank you.
Any other questions in the room? No? Anything else online there? That's it. No? Whoops.
No, I think that the rest are the medics, yeah.
Okay, so generating lots of questions, which we will think about what we can do to sort that. So can I just, before Emily disappears, I'd just like to, on behalf of us, ask Emily to accept a small gift. We've also got one for you as well, Nicholas. I will give it to you in the break. Apologies. Lovely. And thank you very, very much. And now it is time for something different. I'm delighted that we are able next to introduce you to Katrina Taylor, who is our Stargardt ambassador, and that's how she works with us. But Katrina has a fantastic CV behind her. Katrina is formerly a city lawyer and magistrate for 16 years. She has a master's in performance from the Royal Centre School of Speech and Drama, and is a well-established and internationally performing singer-songwriter on the international jazz music scene, as well as being a business owner. She has performed with some amazing names over her career. She's also a voiceover artist, a radio presenter. We are so lucky to have her work with us. Katrina is going to share a little bit about her story, and as you might have noticed, is going to give us a performance. So we are so excited to have her with us. So thank you very much, Katrina. Please do come up and join us. So I'm just going to move for our virtual attendees. I'm just going to spin things around so that Katrina is available on camera for them. Lovely. Katrina, thank you so much. And I'll give the stage to you.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I don't know what to say. I've been introduced so nicely. Yes, I'm here to tell you a little bit about my journey with Stargardt. You've heard that I'm currently working as a professional singer. I used to be a lawyer working in the city, but I decided that that wasn't going to work for me for life. And I have 2 children, which we haven't mentioned yet, and I run my own businesses. So I'm usually quite busy. But when I was younger, I was diagnosed with Stargardt. And my parents were 2 professional tennis players. So it was quite a hard family to be born into because ball sports were everything. And we traveled the world. Before the age of 2, I think I had traveled the world with my parents. They were playing all over the world. And at 7 years old, I couldn't read the board properly at school. So I was taken to the ophthalmologist and the opticians to see what was happening. And of course, I was told there was nothing wrong with me. They didn't recognize what I had. And time passed and I was still struggling. So they took me back to be diagnosed. I was told I was a hysterical child. I thought that was quite interesting that Ethan more recently had that experience too. And finally, we found an ophthalmologist who was able to diagnose my Stargardt's disease. Although I was told it didn't follow a classic progression, or it didn't appear classic in the eye. And so there was still this element of doubt. And I think my parents really struggled with that. They found it quite challenging. And they weren't people who could ask for help easily. They found it difficult to have what they perceived, I think, as a weakness. And in those days, that was their era. It was a tricky time. And these wonderful things that we're hearing about now, the genetic counselling and the help from many of the charities, wasn't there. So it was difficult to be a child with Stargardt. But the one thing my parents did teach me was never quit, go for what you want, and keep going until you get there. So I think the message is for positivity and always reaching for something that you want to achieve, because you don't need to be limited by your sight. We're only limited by the limitations that we place on ourselves. There's always a way around things and a way forward. My schooling days, I used all the extra kit that I'm sure you're aware of, magnifiers, binoculars, all those things. And as I progressed through education, I started to use speech technology and computers. By the time I was at university studying law, it was a case of scanning documents and reading them with speech technology. Again, in those days, there were less books available online. And so one had to be a bit more resourceful about how you got your books scanned in. You had to do it yourself. And I think I got very good at not reading things more than once, because it was quite difficult. So when I finally got to law school, the gentleman who was running the law school at the time, his daughter had a disability. She was deaf, and he was very, very helpful. And so in education, for the first time, really, I had someone who was supporting me, and that was gratefully received. I graduated from law school and went on to work in the City of London at a law firm called Lawrence Graham. And the interesting thing about Lawrence Graham was they had a blind judge that worked as one of the partners. And that's what attracted me to that firm. He used to sit in the Chancery Division, and he was a very impressive man. He was knighted, actually, Sir John Wall. He is no longer with us. My experience at Lawrence Graham was very happy. They were very helpful. I had help through access to work, working with them. And in those days, we did an article clerk or a training contract. And I happily qualified into the commercial department of intellectual property law, where I worked for some years. I then decided to change firms, and I worked for an American firm called Deckert Solicitors, who basically worked us to the bone. I don't know if you've heard about billing by the minute, but they took it very seriously. Yeah, you had to make sure you didn't go to the toilet for too long, because you'd lose billable hours. That was quite hard work, and I did find, as the years of being a lawyer, I wasn't finding it so satisfying for myself. So I had a bit of a road to Damascus moment, and I decided that I was going to leave the law and become a singer. And that brings me nicely to, I think, my first song, which I'm going to sing for you. What I discovered when I did turn to singing was that I had a passion for songwriting. And this was something that's very close to my heart. It always has been in the nearly 20 years that I've been a performer now. I've written many songs. And this one I'm going to sing you, I actually wrote for my son. About a decade ago, I had a bit of a turn in my life, and I had breast cancer when I was giving birth to my son. And I felt, yes, a very difficult time. But my son and his wonderful presence has got me through that experience. So I wrote this song at that time for my son. This is called Angel. Thank you. So I've told you about the first chapter. Once I decided that I was going to turn to singing, I embraced it with gusto. I decided the worst thing that could happen to me was that I would fail. And what was wrong with failure anyway? So I auditioned for a couple of places in London where I felt I could have training in singing performance. And luckily I got into one of them, because they're actually quite hard to get into. And I started a year's course, a master's at that time in singing and performance. And musical theatre was really what they were teaching, but they were very good at vocal coaching. And I found that really my passion drew me towards jazz, and I started doing little jams here and there in London. There are lots of places you can go. And very soon I managed to get a couple of lucky breaks. I got onto the jazz circuit as such in London, some clubs which everybody's aiming to get into. And I started off on my expedition as a singer. Now, when I started, of course, I was just a beginner. I can still remember not being able to sing, well. And I worked very hard to teach myself how to do that, to teach myself musicianship, to teach myself about instruments and bands and band leading and arranging. And on I went. I was very lucky. I worked with some of the best musicians in London. And soon I had a band. I was working regularly. And I was lucky to perform with George Benson on his European tour. Some people who may not know George Benson, I'm always surprised when people actually don't, but I know that there's lots of youngsters out there who don't know who he is. He's had a decade of about 80, career of 80 years now, and tons of hits. So that was a real coup and very exciting for me. And I would say the most alive I have ever felt is on stage. It's the best feeling in the world. And I'm so glad that in spite of all that toil, being a lawyer, that I did change. And I think that's one thing for parents to remember. Children change, people change. We often have different facets. So there's not one fixed course for anybody. So I've probably had, I don't know, thousands of stage miles now, but I've performed at Ronnie Scott's, I've performed internationally, and I've had a great time. So my real message here is to stay positive always and aim for what you want. Recently, I wrote an album called Blind Passion. I hadn't always owned my Stargardts and presented myself as a partially sighted singer, but I decided it was well and truly time that I did that. And so I wrote an album called Blind Passion, and I included many great trailblazers, jazz artists who we all know and love, Stevie Wonder, Jose Feliciano, Diane Shaw, some great artists who have had wonderful careers of their own, and we all admire as musicians. And I put some of my own material on there as well. And I wanted to raise awareness of Stargardts, and being visually impaired, I do feel that the public don't always hear enough from this contingent, and the more we can let them know about Stargardts and how they can help us, the more easy life can be. So I think we can all do our bit to own where we're at. I think acceptance is very important of where you are in life. There were times when my parents were still struggling, still sort of looking for another answer. I know there's a lot of very hopeful developments in genetic testing, and I have much hope for them. But in the meantime, we have to get on with living. And I'm very happy to say that I have two beautiful children. They don't have Stargardts. My daughter is 4 years old now, and she's just started school. And I'm very happy that I'm able to come here and talk to you about my journey, and I hope you found it interesting. And I'm going to finish with a song which is a little bit upbeat and hoping for some better weather. So this is one from my album Blind Passion, and it's called Sunny Days.
I was definitely inspired and excited. I don't have a visual impairment, but I thought your message was fantastic, and I took a lot from it as well. So thank you. Then, does anyone have anything they want to ask or share? just to say, we do have a little thank you for
Oh, thank
yourselves
you.
as well. To our fabulous musician who. Oh,
Yes, Dominic, thank you. I haven't mentioned Dominic. Thank you.
We are going to take a little detour from our program scheduling. We are now at break time. So we're going to take a break now instead of doing the section on the Stargardt register. We'll do that when we get back after lunch. After break, sorry. So we've got about half an hour. Do please at the end of that half an hour come back here promptly, if that's okay, so that I know you guys, everyone wants to talk and chat, but we want to make sure we have a sort of a good conclusion. There's enough time for questions that anyone might have left over at the end. We will also be drawing the raffle at 3:30 when we get back. So if you haven't got a raffle ticket yet, please go and get one if you would like to win one of our fabulous prizes. That's over at the reception desk. And do spend some time, go see the exhibitors while they're still here, and use this time to have a chat and get to know each other. Have I missed anything, team? No?
I think so.
Lovely. We'll go and enjoy a well-earned tea or coffee. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We are providing people. Wonderful. So we've got about 20 minutes left. We've had a lot of questions today already, which is fantastic. So if you've got any other burning questions for our panel session, do start thinking about them now. And what we will do is, we're not going to bring everybody up. What we'll do is, if anyone's got a question, if you ask it in the room, we'll ask our illustrious speakers to put their hand up if they think they can answer that question for us, and bring them the mic. So that will make that a little bit more interactive and save their legs, because we don't have the seats up here. The last person we want to introduce of our speaker panel today is Paul Appleyard. Paul unfortunately can't be with us today, and unfortunately he was hoping to dial in, but he's experiencing very bad connection where he is. So Paul is a Stargardt advocate in his own right, and we are very lucky to have him now working with Stargardt Connected. Paul has lived with Stargardt for 44 years. Having been told that he wouldn't achieve anything, he went on to spend 20 years in financial services, has a postgraduate diploma in personal and professional development, and he has been an advisor to the UK Minister for Disabled People. He's been a diversity manager for a major bank, so he's had a really illustrious sort of career supporting people with disability and difference, and helping to get them included. He's also an undefeated triple world champion for blind golf.
Yeah.
So Paul is running Help. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Shall I grab the microphone? I will do my very best to scream. Okay. So Paul has recorded a video about the register, what we're trying to do, and why it's so important that everyone, if you haven't already, signs up to join the register. This will be an important component of that research network that we talked about, that Bhavna has begun discussing with Franz and with Michelle, to help further Stargardt's research. So we're going to play the video now and hear from Paul, and then we will open to any final questions you might have from our speakers. Thanks. Umesh, if you could.
Why we created the register are, number one, to connect people. Stargardt's Connected. Yeah, we want to connect people who have Stargardt's disease, or have a relative with Stargardt's disease, perhaps parents of children, that type of thing. And we wanted to enable people, perhaps in their local areas, to get together, create support groups, share information, etc., on a local basis. That was number one. Number two is to provide anonymised information to researchers. And what I mean by that is, none of your personal, private, identifying information, like your name, your address, etc., will be given out. None of it. What we will do is we'll be able to give anonymised data, such as, for example, on our sample register of X number of people, 55% are of British white origin. Or we may say 37% of the people on this register have been genetically tested and proven to have the faulty gene that creates Stargardt's disease. They're just things I've made up, but you get my point. It would be data that is very useful to the researchers, but meaningless really to everyone else. So the information that we're going to give to the researchers will help them accelerate the research process, which then enables potential treatments, therapies, etc. to come along to help with the disease. Bhavna, the chief executive of Stargardt's Connectors, already had conversations with some of the large pharmaceutical companies. Pharmaceutical, what a great word. And one of them said this will really, really help accelerate the research process. So that was number 2. Number 3, again linked to the researchers and the companies that perhaps are going to be doing trials. We can be a place where trials are notified to. We can be told about new trials that are coming on in America. We can be told about Eastern Asian trials that may be coming on. We can find out about British trials that are going to be coming along, perhaps through Moorfields, the eye hospital. And we can pass that information on to our people in the register. So it's an immediate, direct route from the researchers, the trials people, through us to the register to get to the people who really need to be part of these trials. And then you choose whether to take part or not. It's entirely your decision, but at least we can filter that information through to you. So 3 great reasons why the register is there. And we're really, really pleased that Professor Michael Eades has endorsed the register. He thinks it's a fantastic idea for the reasons that we've said, for the acceleration of research, etc., etc. So we're very happy, pleased and honoured that he's endorsed the register. Another significant person, if you want to say it in this way, has also recently commented that we've been doing some great work in Stargardt's Connected. You may or may not be aware that Bhavna, the chief executive of Stargardt's Connected, recently got an award for a Points of Light award from the British Prime Minister, Mr. Sunak. And he said in his letter to Bhavna about her activities and the charity's activities that we'd done a brilliant job in creating a community that is supportive, information giving, and it's a fantastic way of collecting people with who are affected by this condition. So for him to be aware and to congratulate us, Bhavna particularly, for the efforts we're doing, it endorses the fact that the register is important. It is something that we want to grow as rapidly as possible and become a useful tool to those who need it. So moving on, how do you get involved? It's really, really simple. We've spent time already making sure that the questions we ask on the registration form are very, very targeted to the information that the researchers are going to need. But it's a very, very simple, intuitive process to go through to fill the form in. It really is easy. When you go onto the Stargardt's Connected website, there is a navigation bar and there is a button to do with community register. Click on there, it'll take you through to the page, and it is so simple to complete. On top of it being relatively intuitive and very straightforward to do, we've also given a very packed full of information video, instructional video on how to go about filling the form in. James, the tech guy that looks after everything, is fantastic, and I thought when I first watched the video it was brilliant, because it just gives you every bit of information you need in order to make it a painless process to fill all the form in. So it's easy. Don't worry about it. It's going to take you ages and ages to do. It is very, very easy to do. Now, I guess there's actually 4 principles that I live by, not just 3. I've just thought of the 4th one. And that is, until you ask the question, the answer remains no. So I'm going to ask you all a question shortly, and I hope the answer is not going to be no. I wonder if there are any psychologists out there in the audience. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. And I'm not going to get into psychology now, but there was a very famous individual who created what's called the hierarchy of needs, the hierarchy of human needs. And it starts at the bottom with the very basic stuff, like we need warmth, we need food, we need shelter, all those types of things. But then it moves up to the pinnacle of the hierarchy, the top of the pyramid, and that talks about self-actualization. And basically self-actualization is about being the best person you can be, getting the most out of yourself as a human being, being that person. And one of the ways that many, many people find is the easiest way to become the best self is to contribute to something that's bigger than themselves. So here comes the question. Please, please, if you have Stargardt's disease, or you know someone with it, a relative, or you're a parent of a child, whatever, please register. Become one of our community on the register. For all the reasons I've spoken about, whether it's connecting with others, whether it's contributing to the research activities, your participation in the register, your own little thing, will be such an amazing contribution to the bigger picture. You're contributing to something that's bigger than yourself. Please, guys, even if you don't want to become involved and register, any advertising for us, the best form of advertising is word of mouth. So please, on any platform you may be on, any social media, whatever it might be, your social groups, spread the word about the existence of the register, please. Preferably you'll join us and you'll join the journey, and we'll find some treatments and we'll move on with this disease and hopefully sort things out.
So that yep, okay. So that was cool. Firstly, I'd like, before we carry on, just to apologise to the people joining us online who the sound that didn't work. I do apologise. It hasn't been a smooth piece for our digital online participants. First time we've done hybrid, we've learned a lot. We appreciate you bearing with us. So just a quick recap. That was Paul talking about the purpose of the register and the security behind it, to give you some, hopefully, a sense that, you know, whatever you share with us through the register is safe and secure and incredibly valuable. All the information about the register, Paul's presentation, they will all be made available after the conference, so you can do some investigation for yourself. And that includes a really simple how-to video on the website and how to complete the register. So thank you very much. So this just leaves me now for any final questions people have, and I'd like to prioritise questions online if we can. So is there a question? And ask one of our speakers if they're able to answer it.
Should I use a mic? No? Okay. I'm going to speak loudly. So there's a few questions. Please, can you ask the panel where they expect treatments to be in the next 5 to 10 years, and which treatment might be the front runner? I think that might be a question for Professor Michaelides, and he's had to go.
He's had to go. So we, I imagine Michelle probably wouldn't want to hang his hat on any one particular treatment. It's very complicated how we get treatments from start to finish. And I think it would be fair to say that not everyone with Stargardt's would need the same treatment. So I think that's not necessarily the best way for us to think about it. I think it's key. Lots of treatment research is going on, as Michelle said, with the most investigated condition of the inherited retinal ones. So lots of work is going on, but I think at this time it's probably too early to claim for a front runner. And thank you, Franz, for a nod there. Yeah, anything else, Rose?
Yes, there's one other question from Sophie Papa, so I assume is in Greece. And she's asking, will this be an annual event? I think she liked it. And are we able to hold it in other countries? And can we do more Zooms, please? So I think that's a really nice question. So thank you, Sophie.
Yeah, we so for those of you who don't know, we run Zoom sessions every 2 months for people, which I know a number of people have been part of in the past. We haven't run any this year yet because it's taken a huge amount of energy and effort for us to put this on. So the Zooms will still go ahead later in the year. As in terms of holding this somewhere else in the future, we are open to offers. So if people would like to come host us in other countries to come and do this, we're very happy to have conversations. We would need help and support to do that. But we would love to go other places and reach out to other parts of our Stargardt community who are not based here in London in the UK. We appreciate we're a bit of a London-centric organisation, but we've made so many connections now worldwide. We're really we want to invite those people in to help us reach other people in their countries as well. So yes, we'd love to do something like that.
And just to say that Sophie has said, no, she's not in Greece. She's in New York, actually.
I'm fine to go to New York. Is there any questions in the room? Yes, this lady in the front. Are you able to shout out?
Yeah. My question was, there was a presentation that was done by someone who was visually impairment. So I would like to know more about when presentations are done. What are the different ways? For example, I recently chaired an event during International Women's Day. I sort of struggled with reading through the introductions and details I wanted to, because that helps to get people the attendees an understanding of who it is that is coming on. So I just wanted to know if there was some personal experience or some advice that there was there in terms of chairing an event with the visual impairment.
Well, I think we've got 2 bits. So let's start with Emily.
Sure. I guess my personal experience, I tend to use a screen reader now very much for things like that. So preparing, having something on a portable device like an iPad, and that I can read and listen to and have one headphone in one side and be able to hear everybody else with the other ear. But it is a challenge. Certainly, other people who maybe read large print might have just kind of brief notes, I guess, that they can possibly look at that will prompt their memory about things. But I think it's also about letting other people there know that you have sight loss, so that they can sort of be aware of that and sort of help if anyone's got their hand up wanting to speak, so that you can kind of share that appropriately. And I'm sure there'll be other people in this room who've got a lot of experience, even more than I have, who might be able to give more advice.
Alice, did you want to say something? And then Odette.
Yeah.
Just 1 second, Odette, if I could just.
I use an iPad, and I enlarge the text to about 500 and in bold, and I have different colours. If it's the start of a new paragraph that I'm talking about or introducing, I'll make it say like bright blue, just to signal to me, okay, that's the new bit, and then I might use red if it was something else. And I'll just keep it to colours that work for me, like black, red, and blue for me on a white background. And then I have it on my iPad. It means that there's only like 3 or 4 words on a page, but if I practice it lots, and it's large enough that I don't have to then hold it as close, so it's like pretty close, but then I just press through with either my thumb or I have a foot pedal as well, but I'm getting used to it, not as used to.
Thanks, Alex. And Odette, did you want to comment?
I just wanted to add, with access to work, you can also get support to actually pay for a PA. So sometimes I have actually somebody with cards that will, if there's numbers, I need to data, I need to sort of say the presentation. She kind of whispers things. She kind of makes sure I've covered all the points. So you can use a person as well to help you.
Great. So just to recap for our people online, so Emily said that she uses speech to text, Anne has earphones in. Alice says that she uses colour coding and magnifies everything very big and just practices a lot with that. And Adette talked about the access to work scheme here in the UK, where you can actually access somebody to act as a assistant for you in that capacity as well. Well, yeah, right.
This is on a different matter. There's a question, a really important question about the register. There's several people asking, is it only a UK-based register or is it an international register? And I want to make it absolutely clear that this is a register for everyone with Stargardts, no matter where they live in the world. The more we know about people with Stargardts, the better equipped we are to support them for research purposes and also for social purposes. There's lots of people asking, is there a local Stargardts group? If we know where there's groups of people with Stargardts locally, they can decide then to set up a group locally. All sorts of reasons why it's really important to have an international register. So please, please, everybody in this room register, and everybody online register, and everybody in the world register, and then we'll know everybody with Stargardts. Thank you.
Thank you.
And there's one other question. Do we know anything about Netherlands?
Yeah. Vicky, do you know about Netherlands?
I do.
Yeah, if you do you want to shout?
Well, I suppose just to say what it is.
Yeah, what it is would be really helpful.
Created by Barcelona, Spanish firm, and they created, so it's like a QR code. So it's about an inch or so square, but it can be any size you want. And it acts like a QR code. So using the app, you have to have your phone out with the camera pointing to it. It recognises quite large distances, and you can plug in the information you want into the navigator to describe what it is you want. Now, just an example of it is currently at Euston Station, and what that does there is actually, if you're standing outside the station, you can see with enough using peripheral vision or whatever, or just wave your phone around. It will actually give you those live train times as well, and it will also tell you where the bits are at the station. Equally, I was showing some year 8 girls last week how I used it in the supermarket, because all Kellogg's cereal now on the box. You might notice there's a little square, it's about an inch square, brightly coloured blobs, and if you just put your phone on it, so I can go around, it says Kellogg's blah 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 750 grams, Kellogg's blah blah blah, and I've got some little video clips if anybody wants to see a demo. It's also coming into Pan 10 and I believe Birdside.
Okay.
So it's a lot of, yes, you do need an app. It's free. It is free. Yes.
Is it a bit like a QR code template? So they've actually put text to the
Yes, yes. So I've actually got some in my office where I've described the various parts of our resource room, what's there. So I've actually created those, and actually on the app, ask for some codes to own. There's so many billions of colours and stuff. So you can actually create your own. So for instance, I've labelled some of my cake boxes, the stuff when I make my cakes, and I've got one there, and I wave my finger to it and it tells me what's in that box. So you can use it personally, but it's also quite a good, I mean, the reason I need to advocate for it is because it's also a relatively cheap way of doing stuff, as long as the label is up to date. Somehow it can go into my bus stop, all Barcelona, all the bus stops get all the live stuff. You know, so the bus stop could be over where the music was playing over there earlier, and I could get the navigator to know where the bus is.
So let me just recap for our online audience who hopefully might be able to hear me but possibly couldn't hear Vicky. It is essentially a QR code where you can upload data, and using the NaviLens app, you're able to access information. So in the UK, it's being used in Euston train station. It's been using some of our supermarket products to tell us what's in them. You can also get code fields used at home. You upload the data in there and use the app to tell you what's in the box that you've got. So probably the best thing to do is look at the NaviLens website to find out more information. I am going to have to draw us to a close, I'm afraid, because it is now 4:05 and people have to go. And we need to be finished in the venue at 5, I'm afraid. I wish we could be here all day and all night, but we can't. So it leaves me to just give some to do some final what will happen next. So the first thing that will happen next is we are going to send everybody who attended online and in person a feedback form to ask you to complete that. That tells us about the event, what we did well, what we could do better. I think we have some understanding. But also it's really important because what it tells us as well is what you got out of the event and what more you would like from us in the future. Not only is that helpful for us to shape things for you, but also it helps us demonstrate to potential donors, partners, that we have impact in what we do, and that's how we get support and sponsorship to continue putting on things like this if you'd like more of this kind of thing in the future. We'll also send information about the register, how to sign up to that, and the newsletter. All of the talks today have been recorded. They will be uploaded in the coming weeks to our YouTube channel, and everybody, we will hold on to all of your email addresses until such time as we've got them uploaded and we can share them all with you. We'll also make the presentations available as well. The last thing I want to do is invite Bhavna up firstly to say a few final closing words, but also we would like to present Bhavna with a little gift, because Stargardt Connected really doesn't happen without her. It was her baby, her dream 5 years ago, and look where we are 5 years later, and really nothing would have happened without Bhavna. So could we just get a round of applause for Bhavna?
Come back, Andy. We, the trustees, want to say a huge thank you to Andy as well, because this event would not have happened without Andy. And they have literally been working 24 hours a day since January on this. So we wanted to say a huge thank you to you.
Thank you, that's very sweet.
And our staff, come here. Oh my goodness. Is the reason this exists. So thank you.
Online, or whether you're here in person, it's our first conference and we're really excited. We've done it, yay! So yeah, definitely, like Andy said, sign up to our mailing list, our register, put the feedback form, please fill it in. It's really important to know how we can sort of, all feedback's really important, but in terms of how we can improve and how we can sort of extend and how we can expand. But yeah, definitely keep in touch, and yeah, hopefully some more events. And yeah, so let's thank you. Thanks to our volunteers. Thank you to everyone. And thank you to your family.
So goodbye, everybody. Thank you very much. And we hope to see you at the next Stargardt Connected event. Thank you for being part of our community.